goes, the AusBiz COB is the key stuff you need to know about the day in business and finance.
Hi there, welcome to the COB and welcome to this new trading week. It was a positive start to these 5 trading days. 24th of November, I'm Nadine Blaney. So what happened? We saw really the market open higher, didn't deviate from this sort of level through much of the day, very stable. In fact, even as we had news that BHP has walked away from its last tilt at Anglo American, that takeover there, we did see those stocks rising. Some of the sentiment is being buoyed by traders really pushing up their bets for a December Fed cut. Look, interesting to note though, we've got Thanksgiving looming in the United States. We still have some questions around AI bubbles, although I spoke with Simon Clark from Morgan Stanley earlier today. That interview is up online, and I do believe that we'll put it in the COB newsletter because, look, the case he was making for the S&P 500 to remain in a bull market. In fact, Morgan Stanley has increased its price forecast for the S&P 500 based on all of the spend and reshoring that's happening in the United States. So you should seek out that interview and listen to it if you too are questioning whether or not this AI enthusiasm has brought us into bubble territory. I digress though. It was a bit of an M&A Monday here, not only with BHP walking away from Anglo, but Monash IVF, Qube Logistics, anyone? All of which helped to improve sentiment here locally. It looks as if, well, we're not totally erasing last week's gains, but a pretty good chunk of them at least. Cut expectations in the US. We will have an inflation read, monthly inflation read here locally this week as well, which could go a long way to inform our market's view of when the RBA, or should I say if the RBA, will cut again. Okay, some of the sectors that either outperformed or underperformed today. Look at tech. It was a pretty rocky ride for tech last week, but one of the best performing sectors today. In fact, it was the best performing sector as a whole, up by 2.6%. In fact, 10 out of the 11 sectors were higher today, and that included the materials space. So there's BHP. Rio was up by 1.6%, Fortescue and South 32. The exception to the rule, mineral resources down to 47.21, I think that was. At lithium, it has been enjoying some enthusiasm lately, not so today, so proving a pretty big weight on that materials sector overall. The one sector that was into negative territory, the energy names, with the big heavyweight Woodside Energy taking some wind out of the sails of that sector. We've got oil prices really coming under pressure, even as we talk about increasing oil supply, with the US and Ukraine continuing to work on a refined peace plan, we're told, when it comes to that war with Russia. Okay, let's get across some of the top corporate stories here. And Macquarie Asset Management has made a $11.6 billion takeover for Qube. Monash IVF, though, rejecting a takeover bid from a consortium led by Genesis Capital and Washington H. Soul Patts. MA Financial has risen, and it is on a shopping center acquisition. Meantime, Pro Medicus has signed 3 new U.S. contracts worth at least $29 million. And in the C-suite, a Commonwealth Bank group executive has left Gavin Monroe to pursue opportunities outside the business. And DroneShield has appointed an interim boss to lead its U.S. business after the U.S. chief resigned suddenly last week. And Bapcor has appointed former investment banker Lachlan Edwards as chair, and that has sent its share price a bit higher. All right, let's welcome to the COB Josh Barker, who's joining us from Barker Wealth. Josh, what do you make of today's price action? It was feeling really not so good to end last week.
Yeah, a bit of a bounce back today. We're seeing probably the 2 worst sectors that we've had on the ASX, being tech and healthcare, bouncing back probably the most. So they're both down around 20% for the last 12 months. So they've definitely got some room to come. But yeah, it just seems like after the recent pullback, we were about 7% off all-time highs. So definitely due for some sort of bounce. But yeah, sort of viewing this as a good buying opportunity. Not necessarily on saying that the AI valuations are going to continue on, because I think that's a little bit too difficult to really price in. But we're seeing positive signs from the economy still. So I don't think that necessarily the bull market's going to end. Just a little bit of a change in, I guess, what the valuation should mean for a lot of these companies anyway.
Okay, so when you're thinking about finding value, where do you look? Like, how do you go about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of names, as you can imagine, with the market, a few weeks ago at all-time highs that are really pretty much at their high levels as well. So having to look a little bit deeper down sort of the list and look at companies that are maybe in a temporary flux, but still have that really positive growth. One of the sectors that I've just started my research, not necessarily buying into just at this stage, is probably the building materials companies. They're probably an area of the market that's been a little bit unloved, with a little bit of a slower turnaround from the US market, the US housing market, that is. So they're sort of at a nice sort of discount to their all-time highs, sort of 50% circa. And if we recall, we had great names on our market like CSR and Boral, all be bought out well above their all-time highs. So it's an area of the market that's very revered here in Australia, but it's one that can be volatile at times. So you've got to look for those opportunities in this market.
Yeah, I'm wondering then, with that in mind, how you feel about mining services companies, those engineering companies. They've been so high flying this year. McMahon Holdings came up on the call today, and when you look at some of those charts, I mean, like, is now the time to sort of trim perhaps in some of those names to look for those better value opportunities?
Yes and no. So we've got a position in Lycopodium, LYL, and it's a similar concept where the stock's up about 30% for the year, and you're thinking, okay, well, is now the time to take profits? But the reason that I picked that up a year ago was it was trading around 10 times its cash earnings. And even now with the increase, it's obviously increased its earnings at the same time, but even with the increase, still trading around 12 times its cash earnings. And if you're comparing that to other names out there, particularly in the tech space, which can be 50 to 100 times, it's just a really good sort of investing decision to buy a company that's trading on those sort of relatively cheap valuations compared to the cash that it's bringing in anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you can think of any other diamonds in the rough, please let us know. Otherwise, though, what is dictating your timing, how active you're being? I mean, there's obviously some risk events on the horizon, not just here locally, but we're all sort of beholden to what the Fed does to a certain degree. And then, of course, we're all going to knock off and go away pretty much for the last 2 weeks of December. But you and I know, Josh, nobody really comes back here until after Australia Day. So what do we do as investors in this time post-AGMs, pre-Christmas?
Yeah, I think it's going to be quiet this week again, with Thanksgiving in the US as well. And we're getting data out of the US, but it's so far delayed that it's hard to make it's hard to put too much weight on it when you've got numbers coming out for September. But I think that you're just really looking for good opportunities. Like BHP's sort of lack of acquisition today, I think will be a news story that will pop up again in 2026 as to where they look. They obviously want to get exposure to copper, which has been doing really well. So a lot of the copper names are sort of up 50 to 100% over the last 6 months. Some of the small names, some of the large names are still up 50%, like a Sandfire Resources. And if you recall, a couple of years ago, BHP did come out and make it was about a $10 billion buy of Oz Minerals. So I don't think any name is necessarily off limits for them. They would have a pretty big war chest of cash right now, given that deal is not going to go through. So I think that there could be a few little opportunities. Again, during this Christmas period, it's always good to do a bit of a deep dive. So there's a number of small copper plays that are out there on the market that maybe haven't increased. And you might find yourself in a situation like we saw today with Monash IVF, and a takeover comes, whether it's accepted or not. I think BHP will be looking around locally for some non-sovereign risk, speculative copper miners anyway.
All right. Look, I guess we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. All in all, though, I mean, are you encouraged by seeing this little bounce to date, Josh?
Yes, I would be. It's always difficult to say when a sell-off is going to stop. So you have to look at that slow shift in sentiment. So this is just obviously one day, but it would be good if the markets can just sort of hold steady around these levels for this quiet week for the time being anyway.
Got it. All right, Josh Barker from Barkerwell, thank you so much for joining us on this Monday afternoon.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Now, the stock of the day was BHP. Our experts David Lane from Ord Minnett, Ben Richards from Seneca Financial Solutions.
I think this deal just shows how desperate these major miners are to increase their exposure to copper, and South America particularly is an emerging investment frontier for copper, just given the scale of deposits that it holds. So BHP's already moved on Filo in a joint venture, which is another South American copper play, and there's certainly a lot of junior explorers hitting us up that are pitching copper exploration porphyry plays in Chile, which is probably not something we're overly interested in, but yeah, BHP we quite like.
We've seen the iron ore price hold relatively well over the last 12 months. It's been a commodity that a lot of people have been anticipating we'd see a decline, but it's held relatively well. BHP's a great business. At this level, we think that it's an accumulate recommendation. We've got a target price of $45 on it. And really, if you look at BHP over the last 5 years, it's almost a bit of a trading stock that you can buy it at $40 and sell it at $50. And it's traded pretty much between that band for quite some time. So, yeah, at around $40, we think it's reasonable value.
Thinking about your pre-Christmas shopping? What if you could buy some stonks on sale? Our final virtual event for the year is Cyber Monday. Join expert analysts live as they share their picks of undervalued equities.
We're looking at between 400 and 500% upside.
Because it is going to rally away very, very soon.
Beat the Christmas rush. Register now for Cyber Monday at ausbiz.co/cyber.
We're back and taking a look at the market leaders today. Qube Logistics, after that offer from Macquarie by 19%. Reese, look, I'm a bit surprised by the size of that move, but in the wake of its update, we've got U.S. sales stabilization. We're told shaking off a bear. So it's Macquarie having an improved outlook on Reese, raising the recommendation to neutral from underperform, saying that the U.S. appears to be the driver of its 8% revenue growth in the first quarter. We also had Morgan's lifting its target price. Macquarie has an $11 target price on the company, but lifting that outlook. Iris as well, one of the best performers. It was up by 8% in a trading halt. So just at about 354 being put in a trading halt. The stock was up by about 8%. We do expect to get some further announcements on M&A in relation to Iris Sims. It was featured on the call today, up by 8%, did update the market on Friday. Its price target lifted 15% to $18 a share by Macquarie. Sims price target lifted to 13 cents per share by Jefferies. And Superloop, also on the list, not seeing any news with that one there. Okay, so some of the laggards though, look no further than Liontown Resources, down by 7%. It did hold its AGM today. Boss Energy, Pilbara also losing ground. Look, it's a difficult space, that lithium. Seems like lately Yeah, just given the day, we'll determine what's happening with some of these names. In the small end of town, Monash IVF, after that bid up by close to 43%, the board rejected the bid. So obviously the market is anticipating there will be an improved offer. European Lithium up by 13%, and Northern Minerals up by 9.7%. Flipping the page, let's take a look at this group. Main Pharma still suffering after we had the Foreign Investment Review Board, the Treasurer, knocking back that bid, down by 20%. So tonight we hear from the ECB President Christine Lagarde. We get the U.S. Chicago Fed National Activity Index. Could come in lower with the U.S. Dallas Fed Manufacturing Activity Index tipped to lift as well. Tomorrow here we get earnings from Web Travel Group. We have AGMs from PLS, from Capricorn, from Ramelius, and from Ramsay Healthcare. So how are we looking now for the S&P ASX 200? All the day's trades are through, and it ended higher by 1.3%. New Zealand's market also lifting. We're watching U.S. futures lifting. The Hang Seng is doing well, up by 1.2%, although some chip makers are weighing on Chinese mainland markets. Bitcoin, though, still coming under pressure, down by about 0.5% right now, 87,580. I had a great conversation with Joe Xu from the Crypto Institute a little bit earlier on today. You can find that online. He still is positive on 2026, but I do think it was interesting. He said, don't buy the dip. This is not a dip buying scenario. Wait to see confirmation that things are turning. Anyways, you should listen to him, not me. We do hope you listen to us tomorrow and catch up with anything you may have missed overnight. I hope you have a good evening.